All right, today I want to talk about a really interesting concept that I think we all experience. It's kind of out there in the world, it's out there in physics, and it's this idea of tension. Um, and tension is one of those things that I think comes with a connotation that usually is negative, right? It's like you don't want tension in the room, you don't want tension happening, but tension weirdly is a good thing. It's what makes things move forward. Tension is kind of the area where you can kind of push the boundaries and figure out what's possible. So I want to explore this idea of tension and where it's at least come up for me, where it might be coming up for you, and or how we can kind of handle it. So it's kind of one of those things we always treat as something that is negative that we want to get rid of. I, in my background, have always experienced tension in a way of, it's usually in those moments where you're creatively blocked. You kind of want to work through a problem and, an edit's not coming together. Design doesn't work. A client's not happy. The thing you're, really chasing after is for some reason seeming like it's not going to happen. Like all of these things I would put in the category of tension. At least for me, it always been that. And usually that comes up as, anxiety, stress, and all of those things. And there's a lot of things that I've kind of put into my daily routine and or just the way that I live my life to kind of address a lot of those things. Because as I kind of go further on this idea of tension, having those processes and having that approach can actually make tension into a really, really good thing, and you just have consistent growth. And so let's take a string for an example. So you take a string, let's say you attach one thing to one end, one thing to the other, and you want to pull it along. Well, when it's slack, you can't move it. You got to put a lot of effort in order to pull that string in order to get that object to move. Now, conversely, you go the other way, you pull it as hard as you can. It breaks. It speaks to that balance that actually is needed for the block to move, progress to be made. And so in keeping tension, usually one of the areas of tension is speed. Like a lot of people are like, it's not happening fast enough. I need to be here by this time. I need the business to grow a certain amount. I really want this to work out by this deadline. Whatever that thing is, do you need it? And that's what I think is one of the more important things to explore is like, do you need to push as hard as you need to at that given time? So going back to the previous episode, we were talking a little bit about that roller coaster and recognizing what stage you're on, whether it's like kind of that upswing, that downswing. Tension's kind of the same way. It's like, is this a pulling really hard, move the block pretty far, or are we just kind of continuing to move it along? I kind of have this belief of, call it from the stock or compounded growth, or just this idea of being 1% better every day, that steady, consistent effort can make bigger progress than just that, that spurt, that sprint that kind of only lasts a couple of days. And I used to be quite the opposite. I used to sprint as hard as possible, and then I would literally sleep for like 2 or 3 days because I just expended all of my energy. And it took me a little bit to get back up to speed and back in the zone where I was actually able to perform at, the level that I know I'm capable of. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, is like we get an opportunity that, maybe we've never had, and we're like, let's put everything at it. And that is important, but temper it also with, what does it look like afterwards? Or how does this continue for 2, 3, 4 years? Because oftentimes you see a lot of higher performing people. And what usually happens at that stage is that the performance, they're already operating at the high level. It's more just, can they push it a little bit higher? But they've already tempered with the fact that they're just going to continue that effort, throughout the length of their career, or however long they're doing it. And I think that's the other thing to think about is, can the pace that you're pulling, the tension that you're bringing to a given moment, can you sustain that for month, 6 months, year, decades? And I think that a little bit of that goes back to a little bit of, are you in the space that you want to be in? Are you working on what you believe in? Can you pursue this thing super long with external factors coming in? But that's something we can get to another time. But basically, like, think about the longevity of it. I mean, I had the opportunity to be an endurance athlete for a little while. And one of the things that I had to learn early on was that I had to be very patient. When you have a race that generally goes longer hours, usually 4 and above, and or 10 if you do, super long distance. Those races, I used to start them and just like, be the fastest one and keep going and hold the tank as long as possible. And, that parallel came over in business, and very much the same result. You end up tired, burnt out, exhausted. And instead, if you know that it's going to be a long race or a long pursuit, you can kind of choose your times to push, your times to recover, when it's important to push, and you start to look at things almost from a 30,000 foot view. And that's where a lot of this tension conversation is going. It's how do you start to look at what you're doing in your life or in your business or whatever you're pursuing? How do you look at it more from a 30,000 foot view as tension on a line? Are you moving that block of whatever you're working on and successes at the other end? Are you consistently moving it just nice and steady, or are you trying to really move it quickly? And I think the middle is really where everybody thrives. It's where the market wants you to be. It's when people say, "Oh man, they're killing it right now. They're in a rhythm, they're crushing it." Like whatever adjective you want to add to that, that's generally that state. It's the companies, it's the people, it's the creators, it's those entrepreneurs that are simply going after it, and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to keep chipping away at it. They often say that success is an overnight success over 20 years is usually how it happens, and it really is the truth. And the more that time passes, the more I realize that you can almost do anything in this entire world. It's just the dedication, the persistence, the ability to kind of fail here and there, learn lessons, and be open to kind of constantly growing. And what would it look like if you tried to stop to eliminate some of the friction in your life? Because I think one of the big things is like, how do I step back from all this tension, the stress that I'm under? How do I kind of address all that, and how do I make it better? And I think space is one of the things that's most important. So like first stepping back, kind of giving yourself even a day, go on a walk, get outside. A little bit of nature recharge helps. But kind of the idea that you got to gain perspective first, because if you're in it, you're called on the field, on the court, in the boardroom, whatever that is, that's not the best place to kind of, really take that on. Like I had somebody tell me last week that, they were in a really stressful situation, and they were like, I tried breath work when I was at this location. I was like, well, that's not the time to do it. You want to do it way beforehand. This is like part of these processes are ways to manage that tension that naturally comes up in life. Because if you go back to more of a physics type of perspective, chaos theory, or really a derivative of that, being generally the universe wants to be in a state of not complete structure. And so the idea is that you go clean something, you go place something where it is. Well, it's instantly going to start changing and degrading. That's the way our universe actually works. And so when you start to look at tension and you start to look at, perfection and performance, it's really how close to that can you get, knowing that it's going to not be as perfect as you made it out in your mind. And when you start to take that physics approach to a lot of life, there's this delicate balance between perfection, progress, and really high quality work. And accepting the fact that it won't be perfect, but let's give it a moonshot. That's kind of the really cool approach that I think a lot of people are able to operate creatively with freedom in whatever they're doing, but also know that they're going after something. And so what would it look like to start designing around a frictionless or tensionless or slight tension environment? I'll give you a quick story. When I had a previous company that we did super awesome, we gave it a solid shot, but we ended up having to close. Is what it is, happens in businesses and startups. And when you close, you have this weird moment where that tension on the line that's been there really, really hard and pulling, and I had been pulling really, really hard, was suddenly very slack. And I found myself quite bored, did a lot of garden time in the backyard. And what's interesting is over that period of time, I didn't like the feeling of the slack in the line, the lack of tension. Whereas on the other side of it, when I was in a state of total chaos, I wanted that, slack on the other end. Now that I'm kind of somewhere in the middle where I'm keeping that, slight tension through the whole thing, it feels like I can get up every day and do it again and do it again and do it again. Sure, some days are a little bit harder than others, but generally you have a lot more endurance to take on what this is. Because life is going to get easy, life is going to be hard. And I think a lot of this comes down to how do you design the life that you want to live, and then know that you're going to have to navigate a little bit along the way. Not sure if you remember back in the day where you printed your directions, or, God forbid, you had a printed one in your glove box of your car. But generally, you had to really pay attention to every single moment along the way, like make a right turn here, make a left turn here. Otherwise, your MapQuest directions were just shot. And now you have these mapping applications on your phone that'll take you right there, even avoid traffic, tell you where the police are, like all the crazy stuff. And I think there's a happy medium again in that. It's, as long as you know the direction you're going, the greatest stories I've ever had are the ones where I was going somewhere and for some reason I got sidetracked and had a conversation with somebody, and then that thing led to another one, and now suddenly I have a new perspective on the world. And I think that's an example of what can be possible if you kind of allow yourself to take that North Star and then allow a little bit of journeying and side questing. And I think it shapes the human experience even more. And that's one of the things I think is going to stand out even more as, AI and technology continues to evolve and the digital landscapes continues to change. Human individuality, human creativity, human experience, that's going to be not only a premium, but I think it's going to be more rare, because we've been spending a lot of our time living through screens and living vicariously through other people, whether that be people that we respect, people that we're inspired by, or somebody that the algorithm just threw at us. And it's cool to, see what Everest looks like and see what all these cool experiences might be, but there's a difference in actually experiencing it as a person. And when you have that life experience, it changes your perspective, it changes your approach, and it also adds to this big old book of unique stories that we all have that make us uniquely individual. And so I'd also encourage a lot of people to just go explore, go have some life experience kind of outside. And I think like the challenge in that is always, so much of the life now happens digitally. I mean, for example, talking to you right now, this is digital. You're not in the room with me, unfortunately. Well, I think that would be sweet one day. It's kind of the case of our life. Now we have this digital and physical separation, and it will start to blend a little bit as time goes on. Obviously, you're going to have technology bleeding over into the physical. And I think people are looking for more opportunities to connect with other human beings. They're wanting to find what that purpose is in life. I mean, if you take what's even happened recently, this idea that, software is dead and technology is going to overhaul everything, and white collar and all of that crazy, tension, I'll say it, around that issue. The cool part is it really kind of forces the hand of people are needing to look into what they're actually looking to accomplish in life. And now software and technology enables people to do that. The individuality is absolutely incredible, and it's only going to get better. And that creativity is only going to get better. The tools are only going to get better. And so kind of back to the previous episode of just that balance between technology and real life, this is kind of that moment to go get a little bit of that real life in, because we've been so technology for so long. For really the past 25 years has been just straight technology. And that's been the focus. But I think the human experience is going to get really interesting. And so I would encourage everybody to just get out there, go grab a coffee somewhere random, talk to a random person in line, and see where it goes. I think it's one of those things where I have met some pretty incredible people along my journey, and I know that I'm going to be meeting more, which is really, really cool. But I think the hardest part is recognizing, am I on the path that I want to be on? And I started as a filmmaker, started as a designer, always have kind of lived in that space. And many times I've kind of wanted to depart that. I've, gone oh, maybe I'll do more technology stuff and coding stuff. Maybe I'll just completely throw in the towel and go live in the woods. Like, I've thrown everything at the wall. And what's so interesting is I come back to this idea of telling stories in the best way that I can with the medium that I have available, which happens to be a camera, but it could be digital. It could be design. It could be handwritten letters. It could be literally anything. But I have recognized that mine is to kind of capture that energy in a room, that excitement around creativity, that moment that we all feel where it's like there's this moment of excitement. It almost feels like when you're in like second or third grade and you're like, the school project, you just use your imagination to the nth degree, and then it completely comes out differently. But in your mind, you're able to just like totally explore it. I think that moment is so important for not just younger people, but anybody going through a transition in life. It's those little moments can be the catalyst that changes everything. And I always like to be there in a capacity to capture that when that happens for people, because it's one of the most exciting times in anybody's life. It's that transition point where you're presented with a path and you can go left or you can go right or you can go in the middle, but you can't go back. And I think that we're reaching that point where a lot of people are going to be making that decision. They're going to be making a left or right or straight and just chart their own path. And I think that's a little bit of that technology nature conversation we were talking about, but it's also a lot more into just what do you actually want to do, and not in the sense of what do I want to make money at, what do I want to be famous for, what do I want to be known for? Like, no, none of that. What would you do if you had nothing to do the next day? What would you genuinely love to do? And it can't be a vacation, can't be any of that. It's going back to that 2 a.m. thing. Try more of that. Do more of that. See where it goes. And you might find it just starts creating itself. And so this tension that I always am talking about in this, you're going to feel that tension even when you're doing your own thing. That tension's actually almost going to become even stronger because you're more passionate about moving that little block a little bit farther down the road. And so as we move into this exciting time where anybody can pretty much create anything, I also want to caution people that like still almost 90, I think it's 90% or even 98% of startups fail. And so like knowing that could be a possibility. So like, I'm not saying, hey, go start your own thing. It'll all be rosy. It'll all be great. No, it'll actually be probably one of the most difficult things you'll ever do, but it'll be one of the most rewarding things you'll ever do. And the lessons you learn from that and the perspective that you gain, whether you succeed or fail, is worth it. But I also think going into it completely blind is really, really scary. Like, how do you start a business? What do I file? What's an LLC versus an S Corp versus a C Corp, and accountants versus bookkeepers? And do I do project management software? Do I do a product? How to tax it? Like, how do all of these things start to stack up? I think that's really important to at least get a little bit read up on beforehand. And sure, you can talk to AI and get a lot of these things figured out, which actually I encourage that in kind of a conversation of, hey, how do I approach this thing? Here's what I want to do as a business. It'll be really, really good at recommending, kind of those business structures. But again, if you're just asking AI for an answer and you're just copy and pasting it, you're not going to learn much. And understanding the mechanics of business, understanding the mechanics of how a business operates, how it functions, getting comfortable with what an accounting sheet actually looks like, that's the lifeblood of the business. And so the more that you can read those, the more you can kind of read what direction you want to go. And this could be, huge companies, small companies. If you go read all the filings from, public companies, they're all the same numbers mostly, meaning what you're measuring in the business are all the same that you'd measure in a small business or a startup or any other business caliber. They just have to publicly report it. And so one of the best ways to learn is really to just go look at some of the companies that are public and what money they spent as a percentage of, how much they made. Because, you see $500,000 on marketing. I can't afford $500,000 in marketing. So, it kind of, you're like, oh, well, that's not me though. But it's a ratio based on their revenue, their income. I mean, pretty much how they want to operate the business, go-to-market strategy. All those things are part of that decision-making process of how things are budgeted. But again, that goes back to the lifeblood of the business. Now, the flip side, you don't want to trust your numbers just, and that's it. If you look at some of the greatest companies that have ever been built, they took risk when the books and the numbers said, hey, don't. So that's the other nuance to business, is like the numbers are just a data source. It's not the book of knowledge or the book of truth. And your intuition is not necessarily always right, but most likely it's more correct than the numbers. And so I think part of this journey of pursuing what you want to do, or even looking at maybe starting your own thing, explore it by observing how other companies have done it, what their approach to market was, how they're doing financially, why they make the decisions that they make. I think people don't ask the question why enough, and they should, because that's where the fun part is. It's like, why does that happen? Why? Be that 5-year-old. Ask the question why. Because that's where you get to the bottom of it. It's like, why do you make that decision? And what does that lead to? And you'll start to realize that you start to do that in your company. So you'll go, oh man, should I make this decision? You go, well, why would I do that? Why do that? Because X, Y, and Z. Well, what would X, Y, and Z entail? Is that more work, less work? Do I need more people, more money? What's the risk of that working? All those decisions the more reps you do and the more times you do it, the more automatic it becomes to know what a yes and a no is. Because you'll hear a lot that a lot of people say, learn how to say no. Absolutely. It's very important to learn how to say no, but it's almost treated as if, you basically attach it to everything for the week. It's just like, no, I'm not going to do that. No. It's like, I said no. That's not the point. The point is to know when an opportunity is worth it versus a distraction. And that's, I think, the difference. Because some of the best things I've ever done have been because I said yes and I didn't say no. But it's knowing the correct things to say yes to and which ones to say no to, I think it's a compass that you kind of have to learn to calibrate. And you'll make mistakes, but we all do. That's part of it. And go into things with an open mind. But I would say just step one, start to explore what you want to do. Write out your dreams, write out your goals. Don't chat with AI yet. Just write it out on a piece of paper and just write out what you want to do. What would you want to accomplish? What would life look like in 10, 15 years if you can have an ideal play out of what it would look like, knowing that it will not be that, but at least you have a direction. That is more important than having a listed out plan. I used to actually tangent into another note. So rambly one, apologies. Business plans. Usually the first one is, I should write a business plan. Write a business plan if you need to. I have found that business plans can hinder a business or accelerate it depending on the team, depending on the length of the business plan and the detail of it. So for example, you may have a mission, a product, and call it a guideline of how you want to operate the company. That can be a business plan. That's a plan. You're going to build this. Here's what we believe in. Here's how we're going to do it. We're going to do it. That's all you need. Could be one page, could be a napkin, could be a piece of paper. Doesn't much matter. When you start to get into like those 20, 30, 40, 50 page, business plans, unless you're a really super established company and you're going to be doing something at enter the market at a really high scale, nobody can predict 50 pages worth of knowledge of what they're going to do and how things are going to go. When you start a company or you start doing your own thing, it's a little bit of chaos. Like you're figuring stuff out kind of as you go. So trying to think about, I have this plan and all I have to do is checkbox it. It's going to be real rough on like day 1 or 2 or even the night before. Just because it's almost prohibitive because you don't feel the freedom to open that door and explore, what would it look like if my business went this direction? And so there's a definite balance between, the focus and I guess the exploration of new startups and ideas, but just having a direction and kind of a North Star that you're heading after, it's all you need in a business plan. And then the rest can kind of fall around it. And I guess to wrap things up a little bit, and to tie it back to tension, is like the time we're living in right now is full of a lot of tension. Just admittedly, it's tension around technology, tension around jobs and future and what's human purpose and what's the economy going to look like, what's the world going to look like, what are families going to look like, and you just have all of these things kind of floating around all the time. And I think space is probably one of the most important things that people can get at the moment, is just like take a break for a sec and then realize that we're kind of in control of our own destiny to a certain extent. I think a lot of the things that you'll see across the world, or, just across a social media feed or a news feed or whatever that is, that access to information has really changed the way we approach our own lives. It could be from the small scale of, seeing someone in a completely other country and in a sunny place on a beach and being like, I do the same job as you. And you're like, oh man, I wish I could be there. Yeah, sure. There's that. And then there's the other side of just like, man, the world is losing it. What is going to happen to me? Like all of these types of decisions. All of that stuff was still happening realistically. It's just now we're hearing about it. And so and I'm not saying go stick your head in the sand and not, even take in any information, because I think it's important to kind of stay relevant on what's going on, but take it with a grain of salt, because you can only do what you can do in this world, in this lifetime, in your own community, with the hours that you have in a day. So I think it more comes down to, how are you going to impact that world? And don't try and think about yourself trying to fit into the puzzle of the world that's already chaos. Just do your own path. It's almost like a flash mob. Just start doing your own thing and people will most likely probably start joining. And that's the exciting part. So keep the tension manageable, but always keep tension there. Like you want something to chase, something to do, something to focus on, but you also want to manage that stress and not make that the most important thing, because especially some of the barriers that I've had to kind of work around, whether that be in business or personal, there's a moment where it almost feels insurmountable and you're like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get through this? And then funny enough, you look back on that like six months, year down the road, sometimes two, if it's a really big one, you look back and you're like, yeah, I guess that wasn't so bad. Like I remember when I used to freak out about that kind of stuff. That's growth. So know that whatever you're experiencing, even though it may be quite difficult, objectively difficult, you can get through it for one. Two, it'll only make you stronger. And three, it'll just prepare you for another thing that will come up down the road in the future that you have no idea. But I've had so many experiences where this could be years down the road. So I was like, how do you do so and so and so and so? And it'll be like, go all the way back into the archives of the brain and be like, oh dude, 8 years ago, this is what I did. No idea if this works now, but give it a shot. Why not? That kind of knowledge, you just start to stack up over time, and that's how the wisdom starts to come about. So that's it for today. I would say keep the tension, stay positive, and see you next time.